Good afternoon, this is Sarah from Blue Ridge Literacy. Today we will be continuing with citizenship preparation. The focus for today's lesson is George Washington. George Washington. This is a picture of George Washington. He is a very important man in U.S. history. George Washington was the first president. He is also known as the father of our country. There are two questions in the citizenship civics portion. One question asks, who was the first president? George Washington or Washington. The second question is, who is the father of our country? In quotes, who is the father of our country? Again, the answer, George Washington or Washington. So George Washington was a very important man in the history of the United States. And every February, we celebrate George Washington, among other presidents, during President's Day. So three important things here, and I will continue to point out more. On the citizenship exam, you will be asked to write sentences. Some of the words that you will need to know how to spell are president, Washington, country, and February. So it's very important to practice all the different sections of the citizenship test. There is speaking, reading, and writing. So for your writing, there are some important words that you will need to know how to spell, like Washington, president, country, and February. Let me go ahead and clear this board, and we will continue learning about George Washington. George Washington was born in Virginia. So he was born in this very state. He lived in a house that you can now visit. It is a museum that you can visit. The house and the farm that he lived on is Mount Vernon. Anybody can go and visit Mount Vernon and see what the farm and the house was like that George Washington lived in Virginia. George Washington was born in 1732. George Washington was born in 1732, and he was a farmer. Every year, many people go to Mount Vernon. Now, why else was George Washington so important to the history of the United States? First of all, George Washington wanted independence from Great Britain. George Washington wanted independence from Great Britain. Independence. This is another important word that you will need to know how to spell. It is very long and a little difficult, so let's break it apart. In, D, pen, dense. 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 4 syllables. Independence. George Washington wanted independence from Great Britain. He was also a general in the Revolutionary War. He fought with the colonialists. He fought with the colonists against Great Britain. Remember, the colonists are the first Europeans, the first people from Great Britain to come to the United States and start building colonies, the 13 original colonies. So George Washington fought with the colonists against the British. Colonists. The colonists did not want high taxes. The colonists did not want high taxes. Taxes. Even though the colonists relocated and moved to the United States to start a new life for many reasons, for freedom of speech, for freedom of religion, they were still being charged tax by Great Britain. The new colonists did not like this. Let's review these words again. You will need to be able to spell some of these words, including independence, the Declaration of Independence, Independence Day, and taxes. Remember, the last day to file taxes is April 15th. In 1787, Washington and other leaders signed the Constitution. Let's write this date down, 1787. Do you remember when George Washington was born? He was born in 1732. How old was he when he helped to sign the Constitution? Let's look at this long word together. Constitution. Constitution. Con, sti, tu, shun. 1, 2, 3, 4. Constitution. In 1787, Washington and other leaders signed the Constitution. In 1789, he became the first president of the United States. George Washington was the very first president of the United States. He was president from 1789 to 1797. George Washington was president from 1789 to 1797. After that, he went back to Mount Vernon to live. Unfortunately, in 1799, Washington got sick and died. In 1799, Washington got sick and died. Remember, Washington was born in 1732. He lived until 1799. How old was he when he died? George Washington is so important that we have many important things named after him today. The name George Washington is very famous and popular. Universities and roads have his name. Airports and hospitals have his name. On the East Coast, our nation's capital was named Washington, D.C. in 1800. On the West Coast, a new state was named Washington in 1889. Also, Washington, we can see his face on the $1 bill and on the quarter. If you have ever been to Washington, D.C., you probably will have seen the tall Washington Monument. This was named after George Washington. Also, his face was carved into a mountain, along with other famous presidents. This area is called Mount Rushmore. George Washington was so important to the United States history. He was the very first president, and he is the father of our country.